So we recommend going to our online version of this document for the full experience of the colors of Andy's nice charts. So you'll know what I'm talking about when you get to it later. So I guess I'll get started, since we have 45 minutes to go over a million little bits of information. We have here, the main point of this meeting is to unveil this thing that we kept saying throughout the year we prepare for the annual meeting, and that's some VAN best archival practices recommendations. And this was put together by the VAN Archival Team, which is, I think we're all here except for Andy, who's coming from downstairs. So there's Joanne, Drew, Jeremy, who else am I missing? Oh, Rebecca, Andy, and Alex Riker.
I've seen Alex.
It's downstairs.
Oh, he's downstairs?
I saw him at lunch, but I haven't seen him
Okay.
up here.
So during the course of the past year, a bunch of us got together and we were talking about what we're going to do with the need that we have to organize, to share, and to pass on to the future this massive amount, an increasingly growing amount of video assets that all the different stations in VAN have. And part of what we prepared is this best archival practices document. And you'll see this in two parts. And the second part is a survey that we conducted of 22 out of the 25 VAN stations. And just a third component apart from this document that we're looking towards is the possibility of establishing a VAN-wide archival system that's web-based, and it connects information about our assets to the actual assets themselves and possible collaborative storage possibilities for the future. And that's obviously a huge endeavor, but we're trying to maybe lay the groundwork now to have the stations get their house in order and work towards, instead of each reinventing the wheel, work towards ways to best manage and preserve each of our assets. And the document is divided in these different sections, which you'll see. Number 3, the M word is metadata, in case you were wondering. And we have a cute little video that hopefully I will be able to stream so you can see related to that and take a little 5-minute break and just watch something without having to think much. We're thinking about HD in the future, as we all are, because if you're thinking about saving things for the future, it's best to be on the cutting edge rather than catching up, because you're always going to be behind as you get into the future with your archival content. And as I mentioned, the ultimate experience of this document is online, especially when it comes to the charts. We've had many chats. We meet about once a month on Skype or Uber conference or whatever, or in person sometimes. And we're from 7 different stations, and we've been talking about common needs and challenges that all these different small or large stations are facing, and whether you're from a teeny tiny station that is doing everything with one person or large station, there's always certain limits to what you can do when it comes to all this growing amount of stuff that you're gathering and sharing for your communities and for your stakeholders. So there's sort of 3 needs that we identified, and one is to organize your materials in-house and to be able to access them. And the second one is to preserve them for the future, for those people sometime in 10, 100, 1,000 years, who knows. And the third one is to share the materials with the public. And of course there's always limits and challenges to all these noble efforts, and one of the first major ones is time. I mean, when you really get down to it, a lot of the stations that we surveyed mentioned how difficult it was to have the staff time to go through and do anything extra. They're like, we're doing this the best we can with our current system, and we don't have any extra hours or resources to do this, which is one more plug for doing a collaborative effort, because hey, we can all save time if we do something that's done in a common way. The second thing is a technical and a space thing, an energy thing having to do with your different storage options. and the costs of drives or RAID systems or Drobo systems. And the fourth one is a knowledge issue, being up to date on the latest, because when it comes to archiving or tools available or systems available, there's always something newer and better. And what do you do when the formats of files are constantly changing and there's new ways, Codex or things on the horizon that would make things better, and you're still using the old system. So it's like a knowledge thing that is another reason why it's valuable for us to sort of be in touch about these things and try to come to some, sort of consensus about what works right now with our framework. And then there's the issue of, you've got both all this new stuff that's being captured constantly. We all know how much material we're capturing on our chips or our tapes every day on our drives. So there's a challenge of this, constant flow of new data assets, and then there's video assets, and then there's all the material from the past kind of sitting in our storage places, either gathering dust or being pulled out when like Bernie Sanders runs for president, or that you have to deal with the really old dinosaur formats and the very latest stuff that you just, you have to create all these new rules when you get your new camera. So I'm going to hand it over now to Drew.
Sure.
And that goose, actually, you'll see, does, have a context. So there's a archival planning sort of big picture that Drew can say a few words about that's in our document.
Sure, and seeing that most of you have the document, I'm not going to read through these, but if I'll contextualize these a little bit. This is really meant to kind of guide your thinking, your station's thinking in developing an archival plan. An archival plan really being, you can think of that as a key component for any content strategy. If you think about what you're doing with your content in terms of distribution, preservation, we're really trying to demonstrate the importance of looking at archiving in a broader content strategy. And we really, I think we undermine ourselves if we don't allocate the time and resources into archiving. Everything we put into production and working with producers, if we don't have the right systems set up to preserve that content, make that content discoverable, what is it all worth in the end if we lose it? So, it's definitely a very timely topic. Analog assets are degrading pretty fast. I think there's a lot of evolving expectations of viewers and a variety of stakeholders. And so this section is really just kind of coming from a broader perspective, guiding your thinking, and what are the primary challenges and themes that we need to look at, including disasters, a disaster plan. We highly recommend that stations actually establish a formal, documented data recovery plan, a disaster plan. If the person dealing with content is no longer working there, how are the other staff going to find that content, in the event of some major server failure or something? So having that kind of information, where is data backed up, where are the media assets, where is the metadata, thinking 5-10 years down the road, how, what can you do with all the content you've been producing? So this, this document as a whole will help you create a system that really leverages your archives, so you can actually use them. After video distribution, that is not the end of the programming life cycle. It's archiving is really the next step. So I'll leave it at that. I think we can.
Okay. And I think I'll show a video next that I promised. Okay. If I can get this to work. This is by somebody. Joanne found this video. It's by Elia Sheikh.
Thank you.
And it's what is metadata. And after we look at this 5-minute video, we'll talk about some of the minimums for metadata that we recommend to stations.
And I'll just state while we're pulling this up, any of these committee members are available for you guys if you have any questions, if you want to have conversations one-on-one with any of us about unique characteristics of your station, the specific challenges you might have. We're certainly available to you guys in person or, phone call, email. So.
Except me, book with my agent.
So Joanne, who's from Northwest Access TV and also UVM library background, can tell us a little bit about the metadata minimums that we recommend.
Well, you've got a pretty good list here. The point is like I said, the metadata is what you hang on to so that you can collate your content, categorize it the way you need to, and then so that you can search it and discover it and find it and retrieve it. And that's the basic concept. So these are a list of the things that probably every station should, in whatever way they can, because in the library world and in most any kind of archival world, museums, music libraries, everything, they have come to an agreement on terminology so that they use the same dictionary of terms so that a particular term means the same thing in one place as the other, so that multiple databases, multiple libraries, multiple archives can be searched and you'll be finding the same category of things. So without imposing a standardized vocabulary right away, because everybody will push back on that and it never works the same way for everybody. Whatever you decide on, if you can please be consistent to keep the way you name your files, to keep the way you name them in whatever kind of database you use, consistent, so that everything of the same kind has the same title so that the computer can find them all, then it's a lot easier for the programmers to write a script or to find a software that will translate your language to the larger language used by the larger entity that might be interested in your content. And so these are the recommendations. I won't read them, but that it seems to us, is there a more basic list? I mean, I've got that list of baby steps that are in the extra data.
Yeah.
Do you consider these all equally important, all necessary? Do you have a few that are the most important, and then the second tier of we'll add this when we have more time?
I think they all
most
should
important.
be
Yeah.
included.
Okay.
The types of
Yeah.
information. And just because I'm seeing that we have like 20 minutes left all of a sudden, right? Because we have 45 minutes.
Damn.
So we'll move on
Right. So
to
that's-
the basic thoughts about codex and file types. We spent a lot of time on this and sort of came up with this recommendation of a format that seems to work.
Yeah, I'll buzz through that. But, I just want to make a brief comment about Joanne's comments and about my comments this morning. It's really not about what you decide individually as an access station. It's more of a thought process of what can we all do together to ensure this archiving and this file naming and this media sharing works, for here and now and in perpetuity. So that someone who is unfamiliar with what we do can look down our archive list and be able to navigate it and find what they need. And for us to do the same thing. But anyway, briefly, file types and codex, which falls under the same purview. At some point, it needs to be decided what's the best practice for a file type in a codex. So I'm just going to pick some parts to read and then maybe summarize some other parts. So when it comes to the best file format codec used to save files to, there are four things that most stations think about. Is their playback format, their editing system, their web formats, and their DVD formats. Although DVDs are eventually going to be phased out. And we will move to an entirely digital file format. MPEG-2s, MPEG-1s, layer 1 and 2 audio, those are what we're all sort of the most familiar with as far as playback. Most of us, although some of us are using H.264, I think Alex is using that. Although that's probably a preferable way of playing out into a transport stream or a program stream. It's not necessarily the best one for archiving. So with our collective heads put together, we sort of came down in the camp of H.264. It provides the best quality and the best compression rate for archiving.
And just because we do want to have time to go over our survey results.
Okay. Well, I can wrap it up.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were, yeah, sorry.
AC3 is a good audio codec. Again, MPEG-4 is usable on the web and then also in an archive, so you can get sort of double bang for your buck there. And then I will actually defer to the next speaker now.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sure. Have we discussed anything about like H.265?
We did. We talked briefly about H.265, and none of us collectively could really find where that had been a useful application in production at the production level. There's a lot of theories going on about it.
Okay. I was curious.
But
I mean, I know.
we couldn't really find an example of it in real time.
I mean, the challenge is that there are encoders. You can get X265 as the software encoder for it, but the challenge really is that H.264 sort of hit. It was the popular codec when suddenly a lot of people started making silicon, like hardware chips, in devices that actually decode it and encode it. And so from a long-term longevity point of view, you know, we know that there's a whole ecosystem that really works well with H.264 video codec and the AAC audio codec. And so it was sort of like, you know, it's a path of least resistance. One of the trade-offs with H.264 is that if you don't have all intra-frame prediction, it means that you will lose quality. Now, we're suggesting to make these H.264 files at a relatively high bit rate, higher than you would use to serve to people over the web, for example.
And is that in the technical specifications?
And it's also in the report itself.
What are you recommending offhand?
I think we're recommending main or high profile at a minimum of 3,000 or 3 megabits per second.
It's in there.
3,000 kbps, which should give you equal to or better than better quality than is currently capable under SD playback. For sure, better quality than SD playback, or equal to, and will not severely damage any perceptual changes for HD content.
That's page 5.
You know, I think what would be good as a next step for us is to look at, you know, experiments with intracodecs, because then that would make the process of bringing it into an nonlinear editing system a lot smoother. It would require less horsepower on the machine to edit. Then again, computers are always increasing in their power. So that was sort of how we came down. A very sort of like practical, but not ideal recommendation.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Oh.
And just one point that we kind of mentioned before is that HD is the current norm, even though Vermont PEG stations are not, for the most part, in HD cable casting. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to save your archives in HD, just because that's the norm today, and we're already one step behind. That does have maybe larger storage requirements. And just quickly in passing, we give some tips here on how to deal with your analog materials that you still have kicking around. And we do have an extra online document that has some more information about specific codecs and video types and recommendations. And I'm going to send it back to Andy just to briefly go over storage. I know he could talk for another 5 hours about storage.
Oh, don't let me.
Because we got to get to our survey.
I know. Okay.
So just give a rundown.
Yeah.
Next one.
Yeah, so people are using a whole wide array of devices. I could actually cover this right within the survey results themselves, but
Okay.
really, ideally, for disaster recovery purposes, we're looking for 2 sites with your archival data, and for ease of use, we're also looking for at least one warm, sort of online and available copy of that storage. So we would consider, you already have it all there, sure, thank you. So ideally we would have a minimum every PEG would have at least a NAS that's network connected. And that would also enable us down the road, if we had the opportunity to collaborate on something, would allow us to transfer data. And I think that that's the big thing, is that the hardest thing to do is if you have a pile of hard disks, or you have a stack of DVDs, or a wall of DVDs, or 3 walls of DVDs, or 2 huge storage containers full of VHS tapes. That is really hard. That's really slow to get back into the digital cycle. So the idea is make as much digital as possible. And the other thing is hard disk drives. We recommend NAS devices for small pegs. If you're a peg that has more resources and a larger amount of data, then we would seriously consider people working on something that's like an actual server that has hard disk storage, or a larger scale NAS. The long-term ideal situation for storing our data is probably an object storage out in the cloud. And so there are a number of opportunities we have there. But the thing with, as you increase the storage, and most of the facilities I know have gone through this, you put a bunch more stuff in your racks, and suddenly you have basically issues with your site, because either you don't have enough cooling, or you don't have enough power, or it becomes inconvenient to have that much data sitting around, whether it's 30 terabytes or 5 terabytes. As we move forward, we want to keep 1 copy warm, 3 locations, 1 offsite. And that 1 offsite location, one of those offsite locations could be a cloud service like archive.org, where it's not as readily available to you at your station, but it still provides another layer of security in having that data offsite. Should I talk about this? Yes. Okay. So internet delivery. Increasingly, in the next probably 5 to 7 years, we're going to probably see a pretty big shift in how people regularly consume their TV content, with a lot of the major networks now launching over the top, meaning channels and access to their content for fees, basically like a la carte without permission of the cable companies. So the question is, where is our place if the viewership is moving away from that? Where is our place in the cable system? And the answer is it's online. And the challenge for us is that we produce sometimes as much content or more content than some of those entities, but we don't have nearly the resources they have. So the question for us is how we really handle all that data and keep it around. And so the idea is allowing people to keep the platforms that they're using to deliver the content, but trying to find ways to create APIs and a metadata system that allow us to search all of our content collectively, and then get access to that content wherever people have chosen to put it, whether it's YouTube, Vimeo, archive.org, on a server in the Civic Cloud, for example. So there are a number of things afoot to try and provide more resources for nonprofits. And so if people want to talk to me about the Civic Cloud later, I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't want to take time now to talk about it.
I just wanted to put this in context and mention that the challenges Van is facing now with how to store and access its video assets that's accumulated over 20 plus years is a very common thing. There's been some meetings within Vermont where a bunch of major institutions like UVM and Middlebury and the Vermont Folklife Center are all trying to find a way to face the challenges that Andy was just talking about, to have their materials searchable and for people to be able to find them and to store them. So these are very common challenges, and everybody's really stumped. Like video is the toughest one out of all of them, and that's true on the national level. I've been sitting in on some discussions of the National Digital Stewardship Alliance, and everybody, even if it's the Library of Congress or an Ivy League university, they're all facing these very similar challenges. So we're not alone, but hopefully there'll be some solutions that are sort of coming through the system that we could benefit from as well. So shall we go into the survey, and then I don't know, does anyone have a question for all this stuff we're throwing at you before we go on to the survey that we did of the 22 stations?
And at the very end, I want to recommend 2 of these as beginners that will kind of get you in the door without too much pain.
Is that the last?
And I just want to reiterate that, our goal in all this is just to expose everybody to the fact that these things are churning out there, and that we need to begin to think about them. It's not like a dire scenario where you need to go back to your station and you need to all of a sudden like make all these vast changes. But you need to begin to think about how you're going to make some of these changes. Because these things are coming. They're not going backwards. We need to think about national archives and things like that.
So, we've already talked about a lot of this stuff. The vast majority of folks here, no, I can't read it because I'm too far away. There we go. 60% of people are using Final Cut Pro in some version or form. 31% are using Premiere. The playback systems have played a big role in terms of like what formats people are currently producing, which has been, one of the stumbling blocks that sort of VMX has solved through their, the collaboration with TelView and the transcoding that happens on their cloud system.
Big issue.
And we still have a majority of stations producing in SD, and we have archiving their content. The archival version that they keep is an SD version. Maybe even if they shot it in HD, it might be a letterbox SD version of that HD content. And some of them are keeping, only 9 are keeping, so there are 22 stations total. Sorry, I'm not really doing a very good introduction job here. 22 stations surveyed. So we didn't get every station, and we hope to catch up with the remaining ones over the next couple months. For archival choices, the vast majority of people are just keeping whatever they broadcast as their archival copy, or their copy of record. And just over a quarter of us are making H.264 files from those and keeping those as. We didn't get these estimates from everybody, but from the people where the stations we did get estimates from, it's 11 stations, so just about half the stations had a number that they could actually tell us in terms of like the storage space used by their digital archives currently. So we have basically roughly from between 5 or 6 to 30 seems to be where most of the stations in that grouping lie. And then we also ask them, how much is it growing year on year? And that was a pretty consistent, and we sort of would expect that. So we're assuming that the longer bars here mean that they've been archiving for a longer time, and that the shorter red bars really are about how much additional they're adding to that graph each year out. So if you look down here, based upon those numbers, which admittedly is a sample of about half of the stations, we have projected storage going up past the half petabyte mark by 2018, really. So collectively between all the stations estimated out. So that's a lot of data, and it's only going to get more as more stations switch to HD and bring old analog content into the digital archiving system.
And it's just for one copy, right? It's not even getting
So
into
this
the
is
additional.
and this is one copy of your data. So if we're talking about 3 copies of your data, maybe one you're paying a cloud service for. This is an awful lot of data storage. So we need different sort of scale thinking about how we would handle this problem collectively. So backup copies. Stations with multiple copies. Half the stations have only 1 copy of their archival data right now. A quarter have 2, and a couple have more than 2. A couple have 3, and I think 1 station has 4. The important thing to read with these graphs is they do reference the side, because for some of these questions or some of these tabulations, only a portion of the stations surveyed had answers for these questions. Some of them, one station doesn't have any digital archives, for example, of those surveyed. So keep in mind when you're reading these pie charts, make sure to reference the paragraphs to understand that, this is actually only 10 of the stations that I'm looking at here. So, in the index catalogs, archives, and metadata. So, okay. When it comes to metadata, a lot of people are doing a lot of different things, as you could guess, because it's all based on whatever workflow we've developed in-house. Roughly 68% keep descriptive content information about the archival file in a digital system that they can query. 60% of those keep it in a database. The rest keep it in some sort of digital document, maybe even just a Google spreadsheet. And of the 8 stations that have a physical catalog system to go along with that digital system that has assets in it that may be older than their digital archival system. Let's see. These are I think there are only 8. Yeah, 8 stations have an archive system that involves no digital link between metadata and digital archival content, and they rely on file system or file name conventions to find the content that they want. So often it's relying on a date and some notion of what the program was about to find that piece of data. We've already talked about file names a lot. The popular ones are date and content. You can read this at your leisure. So on and offsite storage. So 59% had those media catalogs. For the people that had those old catalogs of SVHS tapes or DVDs or DVCAM tapes, 13 of those, they relied on web database, Google Docs, etc. Anyway, there's a ton of data that you can dig into here. I don't know what the basic things that we learned is that as we got into the actual nitty-gritty of what people are really doing with their archives, it sort of just spread out and split really widely with what people's strategies were and what their workflows were, and it made it really hard to actually coherently summarize the data, because sort of like you want to be able to put things in categories, and it's very difficult to. People are using almost completely different ways of offsite storage for everything from moving hard drives on a periodic basis to dropping them in things like Vimeo or YouTube. And those are really what we would normally consider delivery mechanisms for your content, not archival mechanisms, but it is an offsite copy of that data. So it's just keep in mind when you're evaluating different ways you might want to set up your workflow. The suggestions that we came up with were as a result of looking at this data and saying, well, what does it seem like we could agree upon that is reasonable to do? So a lot of people are using network attached storage, or NASs, or hard disk drive RAID. We still have a sizable chunk of people. Looks like 9 out of 22 stations are using single hard disk drive. Some of these will, if people use more than one type, that'll be also recorded here. So this may be like someone has a single hard disk drive library, and someone also has a NAS in their office or something like that. Still folks are still using DVD libraries, either data or video disks, as part of that archival workflow. And not so many of us are actually using services to present our archival video as video on demand. And the top ones there were, almost a quarter wasn't on the web. And then a third was using other video on demand. And then the last half of us basically are either using a Peg Central, Cloudcast, Vimeo, or YouTube. So it means we're using either a vendor-provided solution that integrates with our playback system, or we're using an online system to deliver that archival content.
And one of the things we talked about is how nice it would be for this archival stuff to be automated in some way. Like, wouldn't it be nice to just deal with the file once and have the computer take over and shoot it off in all these different places, so you don't have to spend the time doing that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that we've been talking about and sort of dreaming about, finding out some sort of solutions or tools to be able to do that, to solve some of the problems. And I guess we only have a couple more minutes left, but I was curious if any sort of challenges people are facing in their stations, if any of this sort of jogged any thoughts about the particular challenges you have in your stations.
One is a monetary issue, like the need to purchase all this storage. That's a hurdle for us.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of getting a Drobo system. I'm guilty of having a series of independent box store hard drives and having a copy at my home and a copy at, right now it's like 6 drives. That's all our little station has from the digitized stuff. But I'm like, okay, I gotta get this Drobo one instead of buying these box store things that are less reliable and they're here and they're there. But yeah, it costs. So.
Yeah, and I mean,
Well, I was just going to say, it looks like we should just be looking at a H.264 workflow period and just do everything.
I mean, yeah, some people are on playback systems that can't play that.
Yeah, but if we were to look to the future when we could, if H.264 looks like it has the life that you were saying ahead of it, then we would probably want to try to use H.264 right straight through.
Yeah, the challenge is that, Codex will change, so we should always expect to have to re-encode our data. And so the question is what form could we have it in that'll make it most effective for re-encoding? And H.264 isn't the best format to have it in. I mean, if we really wanted to have it in a good format, we'd have some sort of like very high bit rate intra-codec.
But that's not
But
practical.
that's not practical because our storage would go through the roof, and we can't manage that. So the question really is, when we look ahead at the next generation of codecs, there's H.265, which is likely going to be patent encumbered. We don't know yet. Meaning by that, I mean you may actually be charged a fee if you want to use an H.265 encoder with your content in certain situations. H.264 has the same problem, but actually the MPEG experts group actually said we are going to waive all those fees, and thereby they sort of, in a way, made it sort of the default standard for interchanging video files on the web. And the wide array of hardware support makes it effective. So there's H.265, there's VP9, which is when Google bought onto their encoding suite, they open sourced VP8. They made a subsidiary codec of that, VP9. VP9 and H.265, they are both targeted at Ultra HD and 3D applications. There's also Xife, the free and open source codec organization. I don't know if they actually are formally a foundation, but in any case, probably the Videoland Foundation and Xife are probably the most up to date on the open source model. They had the Theora video codec, and they're now working on the Dala video codec, and they're using the Opus audio codec with that. That's focused on also being a 4K 3D capable storage. So what we're seeing as the video sizes are getting bigger, people are trying to have newer schemes to compress the video and deliver it effectively without a perceptual loss in the image quality.
And while all that is very true and pertinent, I think the point here is that we can make informative collective decisions about codecs, as a group, moving forward in preparation for archiving our stuff at the best possible rate. I mean, I think it's probably folly for each station to go out and find what they consider their best codec based on what they know, without making that movement and that decision with the information that the group can provide. I think we're talking about a unifying sort of decision.
Yeah, and I'm sort of seeing a consensus of H.264 3 megabits per second.
At a minimum, yeah.
Minimum.
I mean, probably.
Go higher.
You could probably go up to 10, and it would be a smart choice.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we haven't looked at is doing a higher bit rate. I mean, the reality is that it's meant to spark a discussion amongst us to come up with a reliable standard. And
Right.
I think this is really our effort at, like, as you increase the profiles and levels, it takes longer to encode. We don't want to tie up people's workstations. If they're encoding twice, one for a playout system that doesn't play H.264, and then one for archiving, it's going to slow down people's workflows. So, we have to figure out a way to make it work for everybody.
And I think Joanne had some burning.
It's at the very end, if you look at the back page, in this upper section where it says Activist Archivist includes tips for cataloging, that's a manual. It's an online manual, and it starts at the very beginning and walks through the entire production workflow, starting out in the field and gives good tips on how you can include gathering your metadata in the workflow that you already have to do. So as each person is doing their part, they're saving the metadata that crops up right then and there, so that the last person that has to put the record together has mostly already got it all there, so that it's a lot more painless. You get the best and the true, because people don't have to say, well, where was that? And so that manual right there, that link will take you right to it, and I recommend the online version because it's a lot more navigable than the PDF. And the other one down here where it says PV Core, if you go to that website, and it's this large website because it's an entire cataloging schema, which is the structure and the language and everything, they go down to baby steps, and it helps you start from zero to consider, what do I need, what is the simplest way I can start, so that you can get your staff on board, so it doesn't overwhelm you if you're only one person. But that helps you get that information saved, so that anything to save having to go back through time after time, or multiple searches, or missing things because you don't know how they spelled something when they saved it.
And the PV4 metadata scheme is currently being revamped, and according from what I heard from people at WGBH working on it, it's being revamped to match closer to some European metadata standards. So like other people are also looking elsewhere for, so that's like to be continued. And just one last point. So as you see, there's a lot of points that we can gather information from all the different stations, continue to gather info as we think about maybe a statewide storage and metadata system. And one last point I wanted to bring up, Rebecca and I were talking about this at lunch, is another big topic to be explored and should be built into our workflows and the way we work is the legal rights that are involved in archiving. We mentioned it in passing, but it's pretty important because when you have, for instance, a concert that's 10 years old that you recorded, at the time you got permission to show it on your station, but did you get permission to archive it and share it in perpetuity? Probably not. So these are all questions they have to think about, and we were talking about how great it would be to have a line in our documents when people sign for permission saying, and it's okay to use this in your archive in the future, and whatever shape your archive takes. So to be continued, I guess.
Have you guys actually discussed about having like a centralized storage facility for all AMOs in the line?
Would that fall under the Civic Cloud?
It could. I mean, I think that there are a number of things is that, we still have the problem of the pipe from your local AMO to whatever storage there is. And so
Not to mention the rickety lines in the state of Vermont to get it from point A to point B.
And so I think the challenge for us is going to be, number one, I'm interested to hear, I'm sort of missing part of the CPG talk, but I'm interested to hear what happens with some of the INET provisions that I think were done away with in the charter docket, but hopefully we can strengthen in the Comcast docket. Or CPG renewal rather, because there are provisions in there that technically allow us to build an institutional network over Comcast's network. And the question is how might we implement that? Because if we could in some way requisition some of the people that know in their access centers, how many people have a fiber transmitter in their access centers? A fiber transmitter, not an RF modulator, but a fiber transmitter.
We have a fiber transmitter.
Fiber? You guys do? Okay. Just wanted to see if I just wondered casually. Anyway, so hopefully,
Like we have fiber internet. Is that what you're referring to? Or are you talking?
no.
about
In this
like-
case, I'm talking. How do you get the signal to the Comcast header?
Okay, yeah, no, we're still SD.
Okay. No, not SD or HD. Fiber or RF.
No, RF.
Okay.
We have like modulators and a fiber. Would our modulators be going to the fiber? Would that work like that? Because maybe our fiber isn't actually working right now. I don't know. Because we have modulators and fiber in our rack.
Okay. That's a good question.
Yeah. I'll have to look
Those
at
are your
that.
SGs going out. RF.
We don't have HD, so everything we're all SD. But we have a modulator for each channel. But we also have the fiber transmitter in our rack.
Maybe they're doing the conversion right there rather than at the node.
Yeah, they may be.
That might be
I have
the
to go
live.
back and look.
Yeah. So there could be reasons for that. But I just wanted to, because like if we could find a way to have a statewide institutional network, it would allow us to bypass using our internet connections as ways to move our content around, and that would be a hugely significant gain for all the access stations.
We had 10% of their bandwidth several years ago.
That would be nice if they would do that. I don't know if it's going to happen.
We
I would
did
love
have
to
it
see
briefly.
But anyway, that's sort of like the view from 10,000 feet is yes, the Civic Cloud. It has like 136 terabytes of storage right now. We also, I mean, I think probably the Burlington stations, I'm just going to say, are working sort of in a very focused manner on trying to figure out how we can optimize our technical infrastructure and make it more efficient, and also possibly make room for other access stations to have a piece of that infrastructure, whether it's in the Civic Cloud or elsewhere.
Yeah, the Burlington work could be seen as an early phase of exploring a statewide solution, for sure. We're definitely thinking on those terms as we pursue our local goals. Yeah, consolidating our infrastructure among VCAM, RETM, and CCTV. Seeing if that can be scaled to a statewide solution eventually.
The problem is it's not a static decision, right? It's always growing. It's always going to need to be added to. Always.
Well, yeah, any system is.
Yeah, and so what we've used at the Civic Cloud and at CCTV, I don't know, this is deep into the technical weeds here, so feel free. Maybe we should just thank everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to us.
Because time's up. Yeah, thanks for listening to us.